Sonavalue Club te presenta Casting Strategies, el programa de inversión y finanzas de Lorenzo Serratosa y José Iván García, socios de Cow Market Seafi y asesores de fondos como Fond Balcem o Fórmula Cow Tecnología. Aprende las claves del trabajo de los grandes inversores de la historia desde Benjamin Graham hasta Warren Buffett, pasando por Joel Greenblatt, Cliff Asness o Tobias Carlyle, y descubre cómo aplicar sus estrategias. Esto es Casting Strategies.
Buenas tardes, bienvenidos una vez más a Casting Strategies. Hoy estamos de suerte porque tenemos con nosotros un invitado súper especial. Tenemos un invitado venido de Dinamarca para grabar este Casting Strategies con nosotros. Es Christopher Dembik y es el jefe de análisis macro de Saxo Bank. Right now I'm going to change to the English because Christopher don't speak Spanish, so we are going to make this casting strategy in English, and we are going to talk with him about his story, how he's working in Saxo Bank in this position, and about all his view in the macro analysis in the world. And I know that this is going to be very, very interesting. Welcome. Thank you to be here with us. We are very, very happy that you are here with us. And the first question that I want to ask you is that you are from France.
Yes.
And you told us that you are from the country.
Yeah.
And how a countryside guy from France became a head of macroanalysis in Saxo Bank.
Well, I was very lucky, I think, because I got very good teachers. I am not from, I'm from poor background, actually, from my parents, but I got very good teachers, and they told me very fast that I was kind of talented with history and economics. So they told me there is this school in France which is called Sciences Po, and this school is usually quite good for students. You need to pass a lot of exams, etc. But I managed to enter in this school. And at the end of the day, when you are in this kind of school in France, the education system in France is very elitist. So you have this kind of school that brings you actually a lot of opportunity when you are graduate. And I was working for some politician for some years, and also for the French Treasury after Sciences Po. But then I got this opportunity to work at Saxo Bank, first at the Paris office. I came back from, I was at that time in Poland, and I came back to Paris to work there. And then quite fast, 2 years after, I was appointed at the group level, handling macroeconomics with Mr. Steen Jacobsen, which is our chief investment officer. So it was a good opportunity, but at the end of the day, I would say that you need a bit of luck. And also you need to understand that the best way nowadays, if you want to have a better life, probably is always education. So I got both, and nowadays I am in very nice position at Saxo. I'm very happy with that. So I think it was the most important, education all the time. So it's every time what I said to students, you really need to focus on that, because it will be the only way for you, hopefully, to get a better job, better position.
Mm-hmm. You said that you were a good student of history and economics at a time, and my guess is, how do you blend both to get your analysis as a macro view analysis?
Well, I am not an economist that focuses so much on mathematics. We use it to have a macroeconomic model, especially leading indicators, but that's not the core part of what we do at Saxo Bank. What we try to focus on is to understand also the global picture, which means that you need also to understand what is happening in history, like 200 years ago, what was happening in history of economics especially, or to take also examples of what is happening, for instance, nowadays in Japan. I think Japan, what has happened over the past 30 years is extremely interesting for us to try to understand what may gonna happen in Europe in the coming 10, 15 years. So I think you really need all the time, if you want to be a good economist, to understand, I would say, history, philosophy. It's not my best part, but philosophy is important.
He's good at it.
Yeah? Okay, so...
We are going to talk about that.
Yeah, you can talk about it. You can teach me little things, yeah.
No.
I always need to learn about that.
But I was asked him, when you were saying that, very interesting in this point, because this is not a point that you can find normally, not in Spain, around, you know. Yeah. This kind of human or humanity studies for applying it in economics. Of course, I'm a philosopher, as was my career,
Yes.
and then mine also in economy, and I found that both are totally related, But normally the people do what you said, that is only mathematics or numbers for economics, and I think story is great. I love story. The story is very important, and I want you to say why the story for you is so important to understand economics.
Because I think at the end of the day, when we take a big picture, nowadays we're in a period of very high economic activity. We consider that it will happen for the next 15, 100 years, but not at all. I mean, history, especially when you look at through economics, it was a period where most of the time we had very low economic activity, we had a lot of inequality. And if you look at the broad picture over 1,000 of years, for instance, of humanity, we know that actually high economic activity, what we are experiencing nowadays, or better, our parents, was an epiphenomenon in history. So I think when you take a very broad picture, you start to understand that what we are experiencing nowadays is only a small part of human history, and it may not last for so long. What we consider that is something that will last forever, high economic activity, is something that probably may not last for so long. I would say that we had only 300 years of very high economic activity. It's very short in human history, so it doesn't mean that our grandchildren will face again high economic activity. I would say they will face probably low economic activity, which was actually the norm, I would say, in human history. So you need to understand the long-term phenomenon. Demographics as well, productivity, we understand it well in economics, but demographics is also key to understand what is happening nowadays. So you need to read a lot. I would say the best economist for me was Keynes, because Keynes was not a mathematician, not at all, and I think he was a very bad investor. But exactly,
Maybe because of that.
maybe you need a little bit of mathematics. But he understood very well history, philosophy, and I think that's why when you are a complete economist, you also need to have in your background a bit of history and philosophy.
Of course, economics, a lot of people say that has a lot of to pay with psychology, of course, Yeah. And philosophy is also psychology, as Nietzsche said, And psychology is everywhere. And if you study the human being used to understand the whole world about what is happening today.
Yeah.
And you said something that is very interesting, that you have to open your mind, look the whole story, and see that maybe what is happening today or the last 50 years was only a tiny part and was not determined.
Exactly.
In the whole situation.
Yeah. I think it's key. I remember there is one chart I love. I think it's from JP Morgan. Is they show you GDP growth over the past 1,000 years, and it's amazing because you see that actually, high economic activity is a tiny part. Most of the time, we barely had economic activity. If you take a look like 500 years ago, most of the people, they were poor. When you got children, you didn't hope that they would have better life than you because you barely have economic activity. So I think that's why you need to understand that. We are in a situation where we are extremely gifted. We have a lot of luck, but it does not mean it will last forever.
I got a question here because it's true that now, of course, it can be a tiny frame time. So I think that's so we can explain properly what is happening through this means. But we were told also that economists, we happen to explain properly what is happening, but we don't know what is going to happen in any case. So if we are good people to explain what is happening now, how do we should act by knowing that? So we know that, so how do you act in your case as a macro analyst to try to flip that side, to try to do it better than the economist in general?
Yeah, we know economists are very bad forecasters. If you take a look, we are not even able to forecast one data that will end up in 1 month that will be released. That's why I think it's not the key to focus on short-term economic data. It's important for traders, everyone, but I would say as an economist, the job is also to explain, to try to give to investors all the way to understand the situation, all the different scenarios, and then at the end of the day, they will make their mind on what they believe gonna happen. But you need to come up with a lot of different scenarios. You will have one that you consider will happen probably, but still at the end of the day, you mostly need to understand all the different scenarios that may pop up. Because we all know that, I mean, clearly even in 1 year, we don't know what's going to happen in economics, what will be economic activity in the US, if we will end up in a recession. You know, everyone is calling about a recession next year. I would agree, we have some data that tells you that. But I would also say that we should be still careful not to stress too much about it because we don't have so much information. Let's say that the central banks always step in the next month in the economy, maybe we won't have recession in 2020. So that's why we are not able to understand, of course, what's going to happen in the short term, but we can plan, explain some scenarios. So that's why I think it's key for investors. Because like most of the investors I meet, they are working in the financial industry. They are very smart. They know very well the market. What they want is to discuss different scenarios for them to adjust their portfolio. Exactly. They don't want I come to them and tell them, okay, look, I do believe that in January 2020 you will have recession in the US because I got this mathematical data and this mathematical data. Let's talk about it in January and we will see probably it was wrong.
Sure. And you are talking about something that is quite important also for investors and for everyone. That is not focused always in the short term.
Yeah.
And short term could be 1 year or 2 years.
Exactly.
That for the people right now, this is long term, no? But
completely. Sure. Yeah, 2 years is very long term.
Very long term.
2 years,
Yeah,
long term.
like
No. But we have to change our mind in terms of what is long term and what is short term. And 2 years is short term.
Yeah.
So we have to understand that and focus in long-term situations, because long-term situations is what is going to give you a good picture about what is going to happen in the economy. And of course, these things that is going to happen, they are going to happen with a lot of situations in between, you know. And these situations could be, as you say, we don't know if there is going to be a recession, or the people say economies this is in English very complicated to say, has predict the 5 of the 2 last recessions.
Yes. Yeah, it's very bad. Even Federal Reserve have very bad track record. So that's why I would say, when you have an economist calling for a recession, don't believe him, I would say. Yeah. He may tell you, okay, you have these kind of areas or sectors that are in difficulties, and when we will have a recession, you need really to look at that, or should not be invest on this kind of sectors. But no one knows when there will be this kind of phenomenon that pop up from nowhere. And it's also a lot of psychology. We are talking about psychology, but recession, when you have a recession, there is a big part of policy making, how central banks and governments will step in to try to avoid the recession to get bigger, and also psychology, investors, how they will react on the market. So we cannot forecast that because it's humans that are acting, but I think that the role of economists is really to tell you, okay, like when there will be a recession in the US, I will not invest on this sector, this sector, and this sector, because most of the time it's not good investment. It's what I would call education, to educate investors. That's our role.
That's
education is totally important.
It's super interesting, and I see your point, and it's nice because I think this economist view has, in general, I think people is mistaken in this approach, in the economics approach, because they think that this is only a matter of investments or a matter of politicians or businesses and stuff, and actually it's human beings. Yes. It's what is happening, every day, with the situation.
Okay, so we have talked about how we have to approach to the economic field and to economic study. So let's talk right now about what is going on in the economy. Okay, let's talk about right now about the situation that we have right now. We have low growth, we have no inflation, we have a lot of debt, public debt. We have people is saying that maybe we have a recession. We have problems in China. How do you see all this picture? How do you see Europe that in my opinion has a big problem in economics? How do you see all these things?
Well, as you stated very well, it's quite of messy nowadays in the European economy. I would say that we have a lot of issues because obviously we are all very happy that we have a monetary union. It was a big step, but we all know quite well it's not working well. We have the European Central Bank that has done an amazing job under Mr. Draghi. And actually, the European Central Bank will probably step in quite fast. Maybe, I expect next year, but maybe faster on the market in order to avoid that you will have a lower economic activity. But at the same time, you don't have European budget or barely. And what we need nowadays is that investment. At Saxo, we consider that one of the key forecasts we have for the end of the year is that we expect we will have more fiscal stimulus. Mostly infrastructure and climate change, because everyone is talking about climate change. But what will be the best is not that Spain, France, or Germany, each one on their side, they decide to have fiscal stimulus. What we need is coordinate fiscal stimulus at the European Union level. We are all very pragmatical in this room, I guess, and we all know it won't happen anytime soon. So the problem is that if we don't have this coordinate fiscal stimulus, you will have, probably some fiscal stimulus in many countries. It will be messy, but what we know is that it won't have such a strong economic impact. So I think, I would say for the next quarters, years, maybe we will have a recession. It will depend on the US, but what I am clearly sure is that we will have, again, extremely low economic activity. And the problem is inequality linked to that. If you take a look at unemployment, young unemployment in Italy, in Greece, and in Spain, it is higher nowadays than in 2007, in the middle of a crisis. If you go in some cities in Italy, it's above 60%. This is a key issue nowadays, and we need really to stimulate all those countries. What we need, and we all know, is that we need Germany, more or less, to pay for Spain, Italy, and Greece, and even Portugal. But they don't want to do that. But if they don't do that, at the end of the day, we will end up with very low economic activity, much more populism, and probably very weak trust of investors in the European Union. So what I would love to see in the coming years is that politicians, pragmatical politicians, I don't care from which party, but they gather together and they understand that what we need is to have a package to stimulate European Union economic activity, which means infrastructure in Germany, which means fighting inequality in Italy or in Spain, which means also to fight for climate change. But it will be extremely tricky. What I know is that most of the time the European Union has managed to do something important in a period of crisis, like the banking union.
The European Union has failed.
Yeah.
Has failed because we need more political union and effective economical union in terms of companies, merge of companies from different countries, and a real union, a real economical union, political union, and not only the euro.
Yeah, I mean, it's not enough. It was very successful, and actually the European Central Bank has done everything we needed for the euro to have trust in the euro. But as a matter of fact, it's clearly not enough. You have labor cost is different from one country to another, or even from within countries, it's different.
Labor, economies,
exactly.
Energy.
And I mean, I am from Poland, so I love this country. But I have to say, nowadays, what we do, we send a lot of money to Czech Republic, Poland, where you have barely unemployment. If you go to Czech Republic, unemployment is at 3%. They don't have unemployment nowadays. But we send them still a lot of money from the European Union. It does not make sense. Why you don't send it to Italy? Why we don't help the Italian banks? So it's politicians to step in. But politicians, what they want, we were talking about short-term, long-term. Politician wants to be re-elected.
They are running behind always, I think.
Exactly.
In this kind of...
Behind what they think.
Yes, exactly. All what we need.
Yes.
In general, the union, no? In percent. If we add in here the current situation with the Brexit or, I don't know, now the trading war, and we are just in the middle. And speaking of that, how do you think about the commercial war now?
Well,
how it is going to affect to Europe, especially?
Well, we have a deadline that is very clear with the Trump administration. If we don't have an agreement on imports, auto imports by December 11, there will be 25% tariff, and it will mostly target German car makers. If you have 25% tariff on German car makers, it means that we will sell probably 15% less in the United States. And it will be obviously very negative because we know all Germany is already facing a lot of challenge. Its car industry is around 13% of GDP, so it's a key economic sector in Germany. So you have already deceleration in economic activity in Germany, but if you add on the top of that tariff from the Trump administration, well, I would say that Germany will be close to recession. It will be very low economic activity, close to zero, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
So we are in a very tricky situation, and the problem is that Europeans, when we negotiate with Canada, with Mexico, etc., we know we are very weak. It takes up a lot of time because we are a lot of countries to decide. Obviously, it's the European Union that is the one leading the negotiation, but at the end, you have governments also stepping in. And I think it will take time, and the Trump administration is much stronger than us. So I would say that one negative scenario for the end of the year is to have 25% tariff on German car makers, and it will be extremely negative. It will be, and I would say December 11 is the meeting of the Federal Reserve, so it's the same date. So we will see what's going to happen. It will be interesting.
I'm going to say two things about what is the talking. Two things that I want to know what do you think.
Yeah.
The first one is the people is talking about recession. The people is talking about what is going to happen with the United States in recession. But I think one thing that I see is the recession is here.
Yeah.
You know? Because we have Europe is dead in terms of growth. But today,
I know what you mean.
No next month, no next year, no,
Today.
And Italy is 1 quarter down in the GDP. So Spain is very bad. German.
Yeah.
So is the recession here? The recession that we are waiting, and maybe we are not aware that this is here. This is one point.
Yeah.
And the second point is, all the people is very afraid about the recession because we had a very hard recession before. But have a recession doesn't mean that has to be hard. It means some technical thing, you know, is two trimesters without, so could be a very, you know, tiny recession, not very hard, and maybe we are keeping the low growth, as you say, for a long time. What do you think about these 2 points?
Well, the first one is I don't think we are in technical recession.
Yes.
But I understand your point, meaning that we are in one way in recession because we have low economic activity. You have some part of Europe that are really not performing well. So I understand your point and I share this view. The risk of recession, real risk of technical recession, I think for European Union is mostly linked to trade war nowadays. Because if you take a look at financial conditions nowadays, is very accommodative. I mean, you take a look at the bond market nowadays, interest rates. I mean, there is no problem with that. But usually, when you have recession in Europe, you need to have two things: hit on exports. We have it. I mean, look at Germany. And deterioration in financial condition. We don't have this part. Because the European Central Bank is opening up and say, okay, we will buy as much as we want. That's the only thing. It does not mean it's a good thing to do. But at the end of the day, I think we will avoid recession, but we will never be able to get out from low economic activity. We have very low potential GDP in the European Union. It's between 1%, 2% max by countries. So it means that it's really not enough. It's not enough to face unemployment. It's not enough to face all the challenge we are talking all the time, climate change, everything. So my fear is that we are already in a generation of people that won't have a better life than the previous one. And if you take a look at young people, most of the time they are much more pessimistic than old people, which does not make sense. In history, usually old people, for obvious reasons, are more pessimistic than young people. So it shows really there is a new paradigm nowadays, that where people that are entering the job market, they understand that they probably won't have such a great job, that they won't have huge salaries at the end of a 20 years career in a company, and they will will face probably a lot of unemployment. So it's a pity, but it has huge economic consequences. When you don't trust in the future, when you are not optimistic, you don't want to consume, so you save a lot of money. If you take a look at Germany and France nowadays, people only save money. They don't spend at all. So it's very negative for the economy. And young people, they cannot
In
save.
a short term, no? Very, very negative.
Yeah, so we are in a situation, I think, where we got like from the Second World War to, let's say, 90s, everyone was very optimistic and you really see changes on your daily life. But what we see nowadays as changes is you got a new iPhone, okay? But I mean, it's not a revolution in your daily life.
Exactly.
So that's why I think
So your thesis is we are not going to face a recession.
No, don't think so.
Only if we have problems with the trade war.
Yes.
This is one point, but that is worst.
Yes, I would say recession is, you know
recession is better.
Recession is much better.
I prefer other things.
Yeah, because recession does not last forever.
Absolutely. But what lasts forever is this kind of low growth for a long term.
Yeah. I think it's really
based in a block of the demographics and problems in.
And if it has not to last forever, this kind of low growth, historically, as you said, but we are gonna keep increasing a lot the debt over time. So I think there has to be a moment when maybe the question is not that. Maybe the question is, how do you see, or what do you do to change that situation? Because when the time goes by and the debt is getting higher and higher and higher, super big, and the growth is super low, so maybe it's maybe it's inflation to try to remove the debt, but how do you see the possibilities out there?
Well, we know inflation is not working. I mean, Japan is the best example. They have a huge level of debt, low economic activity, and they put a lot of cash in the economy and on the market. You don't have inflation at all. So I think the problem with inflation is we have low inflation due to structural changes. Demographics is one of the factors. So, okay, that's not the solution to fight against debt. No, not inflation. The only solution is what they call in the US is a new monetary theory policy. I don't agree with that, but to make it simple, they only say since we don't have inflation nowadays, it does not matter if we have a huge level of public debt because the Federal Reserve will anyway buy it. Since it's our own currency, we can buy the debt as long as we want. I think it's very dangerous, this kind of policy, because it means it's open bar for everyone, and you can do whatever you want. But at one point, if you have too huge level of public debt, well, it will have consequences. And we are not sure, as we say as economists, that it's not because over the past 30 years, high level of public debt in Japan did not produce inflation, that it will last forever. We cannot be sure of that. And it's very risky as well, because you also need to have trust. The Federal Reserve can buy as much as they want bonds, US bonds, but who says that investors will also want to buy assets in US dollar? It does not mean that. So it's very risky, all this mantra. I would say we should not focus on the 3% deficit target in Europe. That does not make sense economically. We should debate it. We should need to promote some investment at the European level. 100% debt in GDP does not make sense as well. We have no proof that it has a bad influence on economic activity, but we still need to be careful when we invest, especially when government invest, because we don't know the long term, like 10 years impact of that. So we know that in the United States, what they called MMT will be the new mantra of all the Democratic Party. I had a talk recently with French politicians. Believe me, they loved MMT as well, obviously, because it's like open bar, you can do whatever you want. But I would say, let's be very careful. It's a populist solution because they don't understand everything, but clearly we need to be careful. The only thing is that we know we don't have the right solution to fight against public debt, because the best way is only inflation, clearly.
But do you think really, and this is a question that I have and I don't have resolved. Do you think really that there is no inflation? Because there is no inflation in terms of what they publish as an inflation,
Yeah.
and this
We don't price it
equation,
well.
this equation that they do.
Yeah.
But in your day-by-day life,
Behind scenes.
do you have your light or your water or your payments, monthly payments, has increased a lot, or the price that? How did you buy with 50 euros 10 years ago? What did you buy with 50 euros today?
Probably
The
much
real one is
well, you have some kind of inflation, not so much, but yes, what you said is very interesting. Is the problem is that we are not able and we don't use the right tool to measure inflation. For instance, I have some of my colleagues, and I agree with them, is that why we don't have also a measure of inflation where you take in a real estate price on the market, the stock market
For
price.
example.
It will be completely different. I mean,
Absolutely.
real estate, look,
Real estate
even
is
in
crazy.
Spain, I guess.
No, totally.
I mean,
Rent,
Totally
the
different.
Huge
rents,
inflation.
the rents
Of
are
course.
crazy. You know, the rents has increased in a crazy level. And yes, maybe you have the computers that have gone down.
yeah.
So yes, but I don't buy a computer every single month.
Exactly.
pay my rent.
And it does
You
not
know?
have the same impact on
Exactly.
your purchasing
Exactly.
power.
Absolutely.
Than rent.
So
But the problem is we don't use the right tool. Obviously, when you take a look at inflation, public data about inflation, they don't take into account rent, and unfortunately, or what is happening on the stock market. There you have clearly very high inflation. But you know, it's a problem with economists. As I said, it's not, we use a lot of mathematics, but it's not the easiest tool. Even when you try to measure economic activity, probably we don't use the right tool. And when you have even surveys that have a strong impact on the market, like consumer survey or stuff like that, some of them, they get back to the 70s and they haven't changed at all the question. It's the same. It's the case in France, for example. Consumer survey in France hasn't changed in terms of question over the past 40 years. But obviously, I guess my parents did not buy the same thing than me nowadays. So the thing is that the picture that official data give us of the economy is not the real situation, the daily life, I would say. So we need to improve tools. It's a long-term process. I think the US, they have started to do so.
okay, so thank you very much.
Thanks
we
a
are
lot.
going to stop
Has
here.
been a pleasure
This
having
conversation
you.
Nice
was
to
a pleasure.
talk,
We
yeah.
can be talking
You
with
could
you
stay here for a few
hours.
days if
Yes,
you want.
exactly.
Stay
Thank
here.
you.
Let's make more videos
Yeah.
with you because we are learning a lot. Just say one thing that I want to use for closing this conversation. That is, you have to learn and you have to study.
Yes.
Because study is the key for a better life.
Exactly.
And I love this sentence that you said because I totally agree with you in this thing that you said. And thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
And hope to
you,
see you
Christopher.
again here in Spain and here in Valencia with our conversations.
Yes, thanks again. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you very much. Gracias a todos en este nuevo Casting Strategies. No olvidéis suscribiros al canal, solo hay que dar al botón de la campanita y nos vemos en otro Casting Strategies.